Okay, so let's find the intercepts of a line. In this case, let's take a look at the y-intercept. Here's a visual for you. Here's a line that I've graphed here. I'm not even going to tell you the equation of the line. I'm just saying if we graph any line and it touches the y-axis, that is the y-intercept. So here is in green, and we're calling it the y-intercept because it's touching the y-axis. Now it's right here at this point of 0, 3. And I didn't put a 3 right here. I could, and I could say, hey, you know what? This line's y-intercept is at 0, 3. What I'm saying is that it's always going to be 0 for the x value. Because if I have it at negative 2, well, that line doesn't touch the y-axis at negative 2 for the x value, does it? It touches at negative 2, 4.5 or 4.3 or something like that. At positive 1, it doesn't touch the y-axis. At positive 2, it doesn't touch the y-axis. At positive 3, it doesn't. Hey, at negative 5, it doesn't. It's somewhere way up here. Um, the only place where this line touches the y-axis is at 0 on the x-axis. See, right here at 0 is where the y-axis is. So our y-intercept is always going to start with 0. Okay? It's always going to start at 0. So if I wanted to find the y-intercept, how do we find it? We're going to set our x value to 0 because the x value has to be 0 to touch the y-axis, wherever this line. If I had another line crossing right here, hey, guess what? It's 0, negative 3, or right here, 0, negative 5, because the x value is going to have to be 0. Now, I'll clean that up just a little bit here. There we go. How do we find the y-intercept? Set the x value to 0. So here is our equation, and this is what you need to be writing down. 6x plus 2y equals 12. Well, the x value is going to go to 0. So 6 times 0 is 0. And you can write that in if you want, but what's 0 plus 2y? 0 plus 2y is 2y. And 2y is equal to 12. Let's divide both sides by 2, and we discover that y equals 6. So what is our y-intercept? The y-intercept is at the point of, let's see, our x value is 0, and our y value is 6. So if we're just trying to figure out the basic spot of where this would be at, 0 on the x-axis is right here, and 6 would be up here. So this point right here is 0, 6. And that's the one point that we have so far. Now, keep in mind, we said finding the intercepts. That's plural, that's more than one. And if you notice, when we were giving our little spiel about y-intercepts, we had the x-intercept right here and like this pinkish purple highlighter. So the x-intercept is just where the line touches the x-axis. And it could be anywhere on there, but right here you see it's touched at 4, 0. And that's going to give us another property that we need to pay attention to. So it's touching at 4, 0. The y value is always going to be at 0 because if it's at 3, is that touching the x-axis? No. If it's at negative 6, that's not touching the x-axis. If the y value is at 0, though, it keeps it right here on the x-axis. And so this x value can be changed, but the y value is always going to be at 0. So you've got your work cut out with you to remember which one to make 0 to get it, but when you go to graph it, it should be pretty clear. Oh yeah, if I put 2, 0 down, it's going to be right here. If I put negative 6, 0 down, it's going to be right here. Those are x-intercepts because it'd be touching the x-axis. If I flipped it around and I said 0, 2, well, that'd be right here. If I flipped it around and said flipped it around, I called it 0, negative 6. Well, 0, negative 6, that put it right here. So the more that you actually dive in and start doing these, the easier it'll be for you to comprehend why a certain value has to be 0. So let's go find our x-intercept. How do we find the x-intercept? Set the y value to 0. So it's opposite of how we found the y-intercept. X-intercept, you have to set the y value to 0. So let's use the exact same equation. See, here's the original equation we had. Here's the equation again, and we're going to set the y value to 0. 2 times 0 is 0, so there's no need to write that there. 6x equals 12. Okay, so let's divide both sides by 6. X equals 2. So in this case, the x-intercept is 2 because x equals 2 and x followed by y, and the y is 0. So let's go and graph these 2 points. I've managed to put the information down here again, and let me just take this off here. Our y-intercept was 0, 6, so I'll put it right here so you can see. And then the x-intercept is down here at 2, 0. That's where it touched it, and we would connect these 2 points, and we have graphed the line. People say, why do I have to learn this? I can do it the other ways. You never know when you're going to need to graph a line a different way. You never know when you're going to need the information of what's the x-intercept of a problem or the y-intercept. You don't know yet. You're in 8th grade. You've not seen what's coming, and I would say that this skill is valuable. I think that being able to graph the line is more valuable, and you need to have at least 1 or 2 ways that you can do that efficiently, quickly. This part right here is going to help you get towards that proficient understanding of graphing and equations, even more so linear equations. And it's something that you need to grasp as early as you can. So here it is in 8th grade. Now, let's go through and recap what we've done so far. Remember, you need at least 2 points to graph a line. So this is kind of like method number 2 of graphing a line. Let's have you graph the x-intercept and the y-intercept. If you get the x-intercept and the y-intercept, then you can graph it. We're going to have you go through and do 15 of these, finding the x-intercept and the y-intercept of each equation. To answer your question, it is homework if you're not finished. And also, do you have to do it this way? Yes, and I'm not even going to give you graph paper. So you're not going to be able to just go and do the old-fashioned way of, let's see, I can plot this point and this point and this point and then connect it. No, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to actually draw an x, y axis setup here. Okay, so here's my x-axis, and I'm going to put an x there. Here's my y-axis, and I'm going to put a y here. And then you're going to be like, okay, my y-intercept is 0, 4. And so I'm just going to put a point right here, and I'm going to call it 0, 4. And then my x-axis, or excuse me, my x-intercept is going to be -3, 0. And so I'm just going to put a point right here and call it -3, 0. And then I'm going to just roughly connect these 2 points. Hopefully yours will be a little bit neater than mine, since you're using paper. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to label the y-intercept and x-intercept right here on a hand-drawn Cartesian plane, and we don't need to graph with all the lines and everything else. We can just literally make these values be what we need them to be, and then we just connect it. If you need to have a little bit of help, I'm going to do the first 2 problems on this video for you. So pause it and then hit play when you're ready. Okay, so first thing we need to do is find the y-intercept. So set the x value to 0 and then solve for y. 8 times 0 is 0, so we're left with -2y equals 8. Since -2 is multiplied by y, we would divide both sides by -2, and we get y equals -4. So to find the y-intercept, now we just literally have to put the x value as 0 and the y value as -4. We have our y-intercept. Keep that in mind. Now, how do we solve for the x-intercept? do the exact opposite. Set the y value to 0 and solve for x. So let's set the y value to 0. There we go. And 2 times 0 is 0, so really it's like 8x minus nothing, because there's just nothing there. I mean, 8x minus 0 is still 8x. So if you wanted, you can put the 8x a little bit closer there. That's fine. Divide both sides by 8, and next thing you see is that x is equal to 1. So what are the coordinates for the x-intercept? The x-intercept, let's see, x is 1 and y is 0. So here's our 2 points that we have to graph, and let me just show you how easy this is to do this on regular paper. Let me pull it down just a little bit. We just need to graph these two. So on your paper, try to do a pretty straight line for your y-axis and for your x-axis. Make sure you put the arrows on there. Here's y, here's x. Now, it's understood that this is 0, 0, and so 0, negative 4 would be somewhere down here. So that's the y-intercept, and we'll come back and label that in a second. Where is 1, 0? 1, 0 would be about right here. So now let's just sketch a line running through these 2 points, and that's roughly what your line would look like. But I want you to do the following. The y-intercept is 0, negative 4, and the x-intercept is 1, 0. Just put it close to your dots there. Okay, that's all you have to do. It's done. If you're wanting to see what it would look like on an actual graph, we can take just a second and do that. So 1, 0, and 0, negative 4. 1, 0, and 0, negative 4. And that would let us be able to graph it. Here we go. Well, it should be able to, but for some reason it's not letting me. Here we go. It's still not letting me get through there, so let me just hand draw the line here as best as we can. There's that one, and let me just kind of tuck this one under. There we go. And then I can stretch this one on down. That's what it would look like. And you know, when you look at what we did, just rough sketching it, it's similar. It is similar. So it doesn't have to be perfect. I just have to get an idea that you can find the y-intercept and the x-intercept. I want to see your work of how you're plugging in the values and getting the values and creating your coordinates to plot. And let's go through and do number 2 real quick. This time I'll just do it a lot quicker. Set the x value to 0, so 4 times x is 4 times 0 plus 8y equals 16. Well, 4 times 0 is 0. I can just divide by 8 on both sides. I know that y is going to be equal to 2. So my y-intercept is 0, 2. Now, let's see. 4x plus 8y equals 16. Let me make that black there. There we go. The x-intercept, set the y to 0. Solve for x. And I know my handwriting's a little sloppy. So this would be 4x plus 8 times 0 equals 16. I know that 8 times 0 is 0, so I'm left with 4x equals 16. Divide by 4, divide by 4, x equals 4. So I know that my x-intercept is 4, 0. So if you take these 2 points, if you take these 2 points and graph them, you're done. So let's just do a very small Cartesian plane here. And there you have it.